with any film, the first step is always figuring out what rights you need to secure. Is it a book, characters, where you're going with it? So in light of that and what potential legal pitfalls can face filmmakers on that
with
front,
any film, the first step is
wanted to
always
open it up to the
figuring
panel
out
first. If you guys can talk about the importance of
what rights you
acquiring
need to
rights
secure. Is it
to
a book,
property and the different
characters, where you're
methods for
going with it?
acquiring those rights, such as
So in light
shopping
of
agreements, option
that and
agreements,
what potential legal
collaboration
pitfalls
agreements, what's the
can
difference? What are
face
the pros and
filmmakers on
cons
that
of
with any
doing that?
film, the first step is
Wanted to
always
open it up to the
Wow,
figuring
that's
panel
out
really good.
what,
I'm kidding.
if you guys can talk about the importance
Quick
of
question:
acquiring
how
rights
many of you all
to
are
property and the
producers?
different where you're
methods for
going with it.
acquiring those rights, such
Most
as
So
of you,
in
okay,
light
shopping
of
agreements, option
that and
agreements,
what
writers,
potential legal
producers,
pitfalls can
directors.
what's the difference?
face
What are the pros
Okay,
and
filmmakers
that's
on
just
cons
that.
of
With
very
any
doing
helpful
that?
in
film,
kind
the
of how
first step is
we.
always
open it up
Fair
to the
enough.
figuring
That's
out
really good.
what,
I'm
if
kidding.
you guys can talk
Um,
about the importance of
Quick question:
acquiring
how's
rights
counsel
to
or
property and the
producers?
different
Most of the
methods for
time,
acquiring those rights,
you're
such as
new.
so in
Okay,
light
writing
of
a short has
that
not been made.
and what
Writers,
potential
producers,
legal
and then
pitfalls
another
can
company
face
acquire.
filmmakers
That's
on
just
that. With
very
any
helpful.
film, the first step is always
Don't
figuring out
that's really good.
first.
Firms that really do heavy distribution deals.
You guys can talk about the importance of
Quick question:
acquiring
how's
rights
counsel?
to property and the different
Most of
methods
the
for
time,
acquiring those rights,
are
such
new.
as so in
Okay,
light
writing
of
agreements,
option
I just kind of
agreements,
take
potential
that
legal
as
pitfalls
another
can
company
face
acquires your film made, and then maybe somebody wants to option it, or do you want to go from the beginning?
um,
Okay. So let's say you have a short at Holly Shorts and you made it. Now somebody wants to acquire your short. One of the big things is the first thing we're going to ask, is it a clean chain of title? And that means you acquired all of the rights, including any deals from the people in the film, including music, including anything. Maybe somebody even donated money to the film and may have a participation going forward. Those are kind of things that we need to know up front. And I think a lot of the times, as filmmakers, you're just trying to get it made. And sometimes a lot of those steps aren't necessarily the thing that's the first thing on your mind. But once you kind of get to this phase where you're going to be going to these big studios, they're going to want to make sure that there's nobody coming out and saying, hey, I should be getting compensated for this. I should be getting paid for this. I actually wrote a sentence on page 2 of this script, and now I am a writer. So I think for the first thing I would say is make sure that you document everything. If there are multiple writers, if there's multiple producers, like you kind of make sure that there is at least something in writing. Not expecting you to have full on legal contracts. It helps if you do, but making sure that you document everything in writing and that there's an agreement up front before there's any work done, because sometimes that can kind of be the tricky part, is if they did everything and then we're trying to scramble after the fact. And you also can get people change their minds when circumstances change. So that would be my one suggestion.
Um, Most of you who are here, more than likely, you're probably, if you're participants in the film festival, you probably have a short film. And if you're just here for the panel, then this information would apply to you as well. So the short film probably is known as what's known as source material. Source material is what's used to create a film, but you can get source material from anywhere. It can be a book, it can be a newspaper article, it can be a comic strip, it could be a comic book. Um, but whatever the case may be, once you have that source material copyrighted, meaning if you wholly own it, of course, if not, you have to acquire it. And that's a whole nother conversation. Make sure you copyright your source material and then separately register it with the WGA so you can preserve your first in line and any separated rights that you may have later on down the line. And then once somebody, a studio, a network, or a production company would normally approach you and ask you to acquire the rights into it. And that can happen one of two ways. Actually, it can happen one of three ways: a shopping agreement, an option agreement, a collaboration agreement. So a lot of you are going to ask me, well, what's the differences? What's the pros and cons between that? With an option agreement, normally there's some fee paid up front for them to acquire the rights into the source material that they can then use those rights to peddle your project around town. That fee is normally paid for the exclusivity to that material so that you don't go to Dunkin' Donuts and sell the rights to somebody else who's standing in line next to you who claims to be a big producer. right? Once that option fee is paid, it's exclusive to that person. A shopping agreement, usually there's no fee paid up front, but it's in exchange for that person who's approaching you to be attached to the project in some form, usually as a producer or executive producer. Now, in that situation, there's no rights exchanged. So it's not as strong as an option agreement, but and logistically speaking, more than likely you're going to be exclusive to that person as well because you're not going to give two shopping agreements out in the market, right? Because then they'll just make you look silly because it looks like you're shopping. It's like shopping for credit when you're shopping for a car, right? You don't want to, you never want a car dealership to look like you've been in three dealerships in one day. The same thing with a shopping agreement. And then a collaboration agreement normally is somebody who comes to you like they're a producer, they don't have any money, they want to acquire the rights, but they don't have any money. So they'll say, I'll collaborate with you. We're entering this collaboration agreement. We'll do it together. Everything is 50-50 down the middle. We both own the rights for 12 months, 6 months, 9 months, and we'll go to market with it. So those are kind of like the different vehicles that you can use to get your source material to the market. And like I said, there's pros and cons to both, but those are the differences. Because a lot of people, that's usually the first question I get asked is, what's the difference between a shopping agreement and an option agreement? And so I just wanted to kind of demystify that for you guys.
I think one of the questions or part of the question was like, what's the purpose
Yes.
of what was it for chain of title? Could you rephrase it one more time?
Well, chain of title comes later on, but the importance of acquiring rights to the property and the different methods for acquiring those rights, such as shopping agreements, options, and collaboration
Perfect.
agreements.
So I think one way to look at the importance of everything that was just discussed is there's three different considerations. One is sales, two is liability, and three is creativity. So for so for sales, basically, if you don't have, if you aren't able to sell your rights because you don't have a clean chain of title, which we'll get into, if you don't have some of this paperwork in place, to give you a bit of background, I represent at my law firm. We represent studios, and so oftentimes we see the paperwork's not in place. You don't have some of these agreements in place, and we won't be able to acquire those rights on behalf of the studio. And so that's going to limit your ability to sell. First, at the development stage, we might look past some of the, breaks in the chain, but then definitely at the distribution stage, you're not going to be able to get that purchase price, which is triggered after the option. Second, as far as liability goes, if you're trying to sell your rights, you're looking at copyright, trademark infringement, uh, rights of publicity, rights of privacy, all of these different concerns that could come up that'll be landmines potentially for you personally if in these shopping agreements with the studio you're representing and warranting that all of that's been cleared or that there's the appropriate documentation in place.
And I kind of left issues out of this because I know there's other panels that are going to be discussing IP issues, so I didn't want to step on other toes on that
We'll
either.
get to creativity.
Yeah, let's do that.
The last part, if you're like, well, this all sucks. I don't want to deal with lawyers and agreements and all of this. But what it does is it protects how your vision will be able to be shown. A studio wants to be, they were interested in your project and your short film if you're here at Holly Shorts. And if they want to use that material in the manner in which it's, you've created it, if you don't have certain rights to certain things, they're going to have to cut things out. They're not going to be able to proceed in the writing room with it, or they're going to have to make their own creative decisions, and it takes away your creative control.
Right.
So I hope that is another viewpoint on these agreements of why they're important.
No, absolutely. And kind of the flip side of that, we've already talked about this. The Mattel case happened this morning. They came down with a decision. Basically, in 2018, a producer sued Mattel, claiming that he had pitched an idea to them and that they had made promises that they were going to make, this his pitch into a show, and then went ahead and did the show without him. That's his claim. Today, the decision came down that siding with Mattel, that the producer was not able to prove the case. But what it made me think of was, um, you know, people have their original ideas, and what do they do to protect themselves when they're going in to pitch to studios if they're doing that? So I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on that side.
Actually, I have a cautionary tale that I would like to share with you guys. And it's actually, he's my client. It's a case I'm dealing with currently right now. So I'm not going to use any names. But aside from, I know she works at Shep and Mullen, she deals with the studio side. Sloan and I are on the talent side. So we represent writers, directors, producers, and actors. So we're going to be representing all you guys sometime in the future. She's at Del Shaw Moonves. I'm at Fox Wealthchild. I'm as a partner. But I actually have a client who entered into a shopping agreement, and this is um, what I was telling you guys a few minutes ago about knowing the difference between a shopping agreement and an option agreement. He entered into a shopping agreement with a producer that he met at a film festival. He didn't look him up on IMDb Pro because if he did, he would have known that he was an asshole. Excuse my French. And you guys should all in this audience, if you don't have it, go spend $99. Go get yourself an IMDb Pro account when you leave here today. It'll save you a lot of trouble. Um, and and the grant he did not use a lawyer, so he didn't leave here and take the advice that I'm giving you guys today. And in the grant of rights section of that shopping agreement, it said that the producer will acquire all rights and title and into the screenplay. Now, that producer clearly had lifted that grant of rights section from an option agreement, right? Because the shopping agreement doesn't grant any rights at all. It's a license for you to go to market and peddle your goods. It's not it's not an agreement for you to take the rights to the underlying source material. He got into this 3 months down the line. This producer was messing up relationships for this writer all over town. He was just a bad person. People was calling him behind the producer's back to my client saying, whoever this guy is that reached out to us on your behalf, he's a piece of work. I don't want to work with him. I would never take your screenplay because he's attached to it. He got about 4 different phone calls with that same sentiment, right? So then we go back to the producer and we say, look, we just want to terminate this thing. He's like, well, I got your rights, so I need $100,000. We're like, well, $100,000 for what? All you did was made a couple of phone calls. He's like, "What? That's my pain and suffering." So he said, "Not only do I want $100,000, I want a executive producer credit and a co-EP credit for my partner. I want a royalty if this got made into a TV series." So of course we go back and forth. I said a few choice words. He said a few choice words. And we're currently at an impasse right now, currently as we speaking, because I gave him my best and final offer in terms. We did come up with a cash offer and some type of credit and royalty for him and some back end. But and to make it even worse, not only did he make my client sign this bad agreement, he went ahead and registered the screenplay with the copyright office. So I can't even, we need to come to a settlement so I can send a general assignment agreement to him to assign the rights back to my client. So the moral of the story is make
Don't
sure
sign
you,
anything.
without a lawyer, or make sure you pay attention to the grant of rights section if someone offers you a free shopping agreement. Everything in free is not good.
I wouldn't sign anything without a lawyer. Because I will say these agreements aren't made to be easy to read. The words that you read don't always mean what you think they mean. And it's taken me several years as a lawyer who does this day in and day out to even see all of the issues with one sentence in an agreement. And so it's not something that, people are like, oh, I can do this myself. I can do this. And if you're fine with potentially losing all of your hard earned work, yes, you can. But it is just not something that's advisable. Spend the money, spend the time. Most like, there'll be people that will help you. I've had several people who've called me and asked me to read something, and I'm like, no, this is this is that. So, and it's just reach out for help. There are people who will help you. There are resources that you can use. Just do not sign this. Do not sign anything because once you do, it is so much harder for us to unravel a bad situation than to get you into a good one. So thank you for that cautionary tale because I you just gave me heart palpitations. No, I can't imagine that nightmare to have not written a single word on a page. I can't imagine.
Deal with immigration, and I can't imagine that nightmare. So, okay, so let's move forward a little bit from. Sorry, I'm gonna forget to use this mic all the time, guys. Um, um, okay, So let's move forward from rights acquisition to production issues. We kind of touched on it already a little bit with chain of title. What are the things that people need to be thinking about in terms of chain of title, setting up corporations, single purpose entities, stuff like that, as they're starting to move forward and actually moving towards physical production? And I'm going to leave unions as a separate question. So
You guys are the union folks, so I'll take chain of title. um, so kind of what I was saying before of the importance of it, especially just being on the studio side and really wanting prior to this, I was on the creative side and really wanting to see creatives succeed. We see a lot of roadblocks when there isn't the correct paperwork or agreements in place for us to even get into an option. So, another cautionary tale is I hope all of you guys, with the whatever work product you have, whether it's a short film, a script, a book, whatever, you get an option from a studio. It's, a very exciting moment. You can have a big delay from the moment of the initial option fee to of seeing that money. Let's say from the minute you get the offer to seeing that money, it can be a long time until preliminary chain of title is cleared. So to avoid any delays and you getting your initial chunk of change, 12,000, 18,000, or a much larger fee, you want to make sure that you have several questions answerable. Really basic stuff. Who's the grantor? If there are two grantors and you have a collaboration agreement, do you understand they each own a separate 100%? Do you have work for hire agreements in place? Do you prefer an assignment, which is a hot topic in Hollywood these days? What third party material is included? Are you relying on fair use? If it's a book and it's been published, do you have publishers' releases in place? In what countries? Are there foreign countries? So there's like a list of questions you're going to be presented with most studios at the time you have an option, which I'm hoping happens for all of you guys, and to be prudent to ensure that you can answer those, that you have some documentation in place, because the consequences are, one, at best, there's just a delay in your payment, and two, at worst, we can't. There's no we. I don't not that important, but the studio can't proceed because there's just too many risks for them. Yeah. But
Well
more
said.
often than not, because we work across the aisle. So I want to also clarify, we work together to clean up any errors. So if you're missing the paperwork, if it's all a hot mess, we try to work together to fix the problems before it's a no go.
should I turn to the union question? So union agreements, they influence everything from pay scale to working conditions. You know, especially now in the post-strike era, let's call it. We're still having some strikes right now. But what are the tips that you guys have to successfully navigate the unions? Is it worth becoming a signatory, not becoming a signatory? And what's changed since the strikes? I know.
Yeah, all
Sorry.
right. Well,
Take your time.
I mean, you can go first because I would talk about what happens once with them in the union versus them facing the union. Gotcha.
Um, well, I'm assuming many of you know the different unions already, right? There's SAG, WGA, DGA, and then there's one known as IATSE. Are you guys all familiar with IATSE? Okay. So being that there's no Shonda Rhimes in the office in the audience right now, I'm assuming most of you guys are going to be newbie producers. So uh y- every one of you guys in this audience is eventually going to have to deal with a union when you're making a film. You can probably get around WGA if you are acquiring a script and you already have a screenplay and you're not hiring a writer to write the script for you. But you can avoid DGA, especially if you want any type of director that is worth his reputation. And you absolutely can't avoid SAG unless you just are picking up people for Hollywood Boulevard with actors' resumes. So now I know the apprehension most of the time is, oh, this is going to add to my bottom line, right? As soon as you go union, it adds another whatever, 50 to $100,000 to your bottom line, sometimes even more. It- So you should know that there's different levels of projects. There's ultra low budget, there's low budget, ultra low budget, modified low budget, and then regular SAG, right? So ultra low budget is 0 to 250. Modified low budget is 250 to 700,000, and then low budget is 700,000 to 1.5, and then anything above 1.5 is regular SAG. And then at the modified low budget and the low budget level, if you have a diverse cast or you have LGBT members, you can actually add another $500,000, 200 to $500,000 onto that budget for diversity and inclusion. So just know that there's different levels that are engineered to help you deal with these unions. Now, dealing with the unions is another thing because they're gangbusters. Um, I would encourage you to find a line producer and pay that line producer who has relationships with the unions anything they ask you to pay them, because that line producer will grease the wheels for you and get you to a signatory status with SAG, DGA, WJ, and another one you can't avoid is IATSE, because IATSE is everything, all your crew. Um, because if not, they're going to they're going to really hold you to the fan because they know you're new producers and they don't have any relationships with you. So they're going to do this one thing that's really tricky. They would ask you to sign a personal guarantee. Um, you don't have to sign a personal guarantee with a union. They will ask you to. You don't have to. You have to. First thing you should do is set up a single purpose entity, right? So if the name of your film is Holly Shorts, your single purpose entity will be Holly Shorts LLC, right? So you have that level of protection. Um, and you make sure you assign all your rights to that single purpose entity. And then that entity enters into a contract with the unions. So just make sure all your T's are crossed, your I's are dotted. You get yourself a good either UPM or line producer, but most of the time it's a line producer who has relationships with these unions. Because if not, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, like signing personal guarantees. Um, Another thing that I see is um, signing with a distributor or a network who wants to license your film, and they tell you, oh, but you can own the film. You got ownership. It's yours. We're just going to license it from you. But the smoke and mirror is you're left with the residual bag and the royalty bag that they failed to tell you about when they offer you that licensing agreement. The next thing you know, and I have a client who got that letter yesterday. You got a letter from SAG saying, oh, you owe us $500,000 in royalties and residuals because your film has now been distributed to Tubi and BT Plus and Peacock and everyone else, and all those new platforms trigger residuals. And since you're the owner of the film because you licensed it, you now have to pay those residuals. So, yeah.
I'm going to speak to probably more what happens for you when you're in the union. And this is particularly to writers. And this is something that we actually came across because had a client who was at a film festival, was able to have a successful film festival run and then had their rights acquired. So as someone who writes and creates a short, you have now published or exploited that original work with this is particularly for writers in the WGA. With the WGA, because that work has been exploited, you no longer are able to, as of today, you're no longer able to get separated rights in your material. Um, it's a really tricky thing because I think a lot of people think and separated rights are basically this nice bundle of rights that the guild requires when you have original work. It's like dramatic stage rights. It's reacquiring your project if they don't end up exploiting it. There's certain passives and royalties that come along with separated rights. They're a really nice thing to have that you do not have to fight for individually. But because a lot of people, create a short film to then make their feature film, they lose these separated rights because that material has now been exploited. And I went back and forth with the WG a few times about what exploitation means and what publishing means. And it is a very broad definition. So I think a lot of times creators don't know this. And I'm not saying that creating your project and getting it seen and getting you out there is not still the best way to go to be able to get you a deal. But there is kind of a catch side with the guilds on that. And usually when we get brought on, we have to kind of tell you, okay, you do not have these rights automatically. Now we got to fight for those rights when we're negotiating with these companies. And a lot of the times, sometimes we get all of them, if it's a really nice competitive project, but it is harder to get these rights than them. The guild is saying, "Hey, you have to give it to them. You can't contract them out of it." So I think it's always something interesting for creatives to know that once you exploit a project or it's been published, shown, screened, it doesn't necessarily have to be commercial. Once it's been exploited and published, those theatrical separated rights are kind of off the table, and you're going to have to go and negotiate for them individually when you're negotiating for the sale of that option.
Oh, I'm sorry. One last thing. When you signing up with the unions, make sure you sign with the right agreement, right? Most of the agreements are going to fall in new media, or they're going to fall in theatrical distribution, or they're going to fall in TV distribution. A lot of times you don't know where your project is going to end up at, right? And new media usually lends itself to the easiest one to sign up with, because you're thinking to yourself, with the new media usually has less cost than TV and theatrical. But if you sign a new media agreement with SAG and you go to the Holly Shorts Film Festival, or you go to Sundance, and your thing is actually exhibited in the theater with people, because at Sundance you actually have to buy tickets. That now qualifies as a theatrical exhibition, and that triggers residuals immediately, because you signed a new media agreement and not a theatrical agreement. So just always make sure that you sign the right agreement going in. And if you do sign a new media agreement and you get into a film festival and they want to exhibit it in a theater, you say, no, no, no. I can do a premiere at one of your lounges, so it doesn't count as a theatrical exhibition. Because the moment you, vice versa, if you go theatrical and it's premieres new media, the moment you exhibit on a platform that's not the platform that you intended to go to, it triggers residuals immediately.
Um, I don't know if this is a basic question, but do you want to define what is included under new media and how that differs?
Anything not TV and theatrical.
Okay.
So Netflix, Tubi,
Okay, that's what I
anything
wanted to
internet
clarify. Yeah. Um, because we think of streamers as TV, a lot of things
is new
premiere
media.
now
Yeah.
in that platform. So, um, okay. Um, and we're going to open this up for questions at the end. So hold on to your questions. Um, so moving from, and we're doing really broad strokes. So, moving from the production, pre-production, now you've got your film, you want to get it in front of audiences, distribution. Um, so, we kind of have touched on the differences between shorts versus features, but in the context of distribution, what is the big difference in the selling your short versus selling a feature? Would be the first question.
I think based on what I've seen, when you're selling a short, it's gonna more likely than not fall under the rights option agreements that we've discussed as sort of that underlying material that the studio might be interested in acquiring or optioning first. A feature length project more often than not could either be an acquisition, like a straight acquisition. It could also no, but yeah, it wouldn't really be optioned. So I think that's the big difference is that you're gonna get a smaller initial option on your short that might be turned into something else later once purchased, and the purchase price will be hopefully more significant. It'll be a lot more significant. But then for a feature length project, that would be an acquisition agreement. That'd be standard distribution agreements, negative pickups, or you can do, starting from scratch of what we often do, the writer, producer, director agreements on behalf of studios. I think that's the I haven't seen on the flip side, I haven't seen studios uh, go into production for shorts or acquire shorts. Unfortunately, that's hard because there's fewer platforms. I know Mubi they're they're good, or Criterion Collection. Those are kind of the main spots. Maybe YouTube of where you have potential buyers.
All right.
I,
Go ahead.
I would say right now, everybody in this audience, you guys are part of what we call the golden age of originals, right? Because now more so than any other time in the history of America, you can find a home for your project, right? Everyone in their mother's doing originals. Roku has Roku originals now. Tubi actually, they have originals now, right? Amazon Fire Stick is coming out with Amazon originals. So there's plenty of places for you to find a project for your I'm sorry, find a home for your project. Once you leave a film festival, if you're lucky to get into a film festival and get somebody interested in your project, and or you have relationships and you're able to go to a studio network yourself, you're going to be faced with a decision. Do I want my project to go, to a streamer first? Do I want it to go theatrical? There used to be in Hollywood what we known as windows, right? It used to be your project goes to theater first, then once it leaves the theater, it goes to airplanes, hotels, then it would go to after airplanes, hotels, then it would go to basic cable?
Home
No,
video?
DVDs, home video, then basic cable, oh yeah, basic cable, and then linear. Linear is like your regular TV channels, right? With Netflix and Tubi and all these other new media streamers, those windows have now been collapsed, right? So once you're deciding on where you want your project to land, think about how far you are in the hole, right? Because if you go to Netflix first, nobody in their right mind is going to come after Netflix, right? You're not going to get a Netflix deal and then get a theatrical deal, right? Because on Netflix, you can stream something and watch it a thousand times in a day if you wanted to. So nobody's going to want to come after Netflix. Um, but if you go theatrical, because you're still in the hole, you spent a lot of money on your project, you can recoup your money theatrically and then maybe as you progress through the windows. But you're not going to progress through those windows if you start at streaming, right? Or if you don't go to Netflix and you get approached by somebody like All Black or BET Plus or other streamers, make sure you pay attention to the grant of rights section. There's different areas where your project can be exploited. There's TVOD, which is anybody know? That's transcription video on demand. There's SVOD, which is subscription video on demand, which is your Netflixes and your Amazons. And then there's AVOD, which is advertising video on demand, which is your Tubies, right? Amazon is one of the ones that's a hybrid because Amazon does TVOD, SVOD, and AVOD. But if you go to one of these platforms, for example, Tubi, which is strictly AVOD, and they say to you, we want your SVOD rights and your TVOD rights, you say no, because you're not a SVOD platform and you're not a TVOD platform. So, and I still need to make my money. So I need to splice up my rights. So I make sure that I get my money back. So you just make sure that as you're making these distribution decisions, you you speak to someone like one of us, or you remember what I just said. This way, you want to put yourself in best position to recoup your money.
And I think kind of an overarching theme, because I know a lot of this can get really, really granular, is creatives, especially filmmakers, writers, directors, you also have to start embracing the business side of the industry. And I think that for me, working with talent and creative, sometimes that is the hardest transition because it means that you need to go and subscribe to certain publications. Maybe it's, that report strictly on entertainment business. You know what Paramount's doing. You need to know what HBO is doing. You need to know what Warner Brothers is doing on the business side. You need to know where stocks and where budgets are going and what's being slashed. Did they just fire a lot of people? These kind of conversations will then inform you on what you can expect to get for your project. I think sometimes expectations run the gamut in this industry. And a lot of times creators are coming to me saying things, and I'm like, have you picked up the trades recently, or have you been looking? Like, do you understand the platform that you're going to, what this platform is going through right now? I understand your expectation is X number of dollars. That's not what's being paid these days. Or do you think your platform has, will your platform do well in foreign platforms? It's a huge get. Like that is something that that's something that we actually can negotiate a higher rate for if we think that that you're going to be able to run in foreign territories. There's actually now even situations where they may be going back to the old Hollywood model where you can kind of split these rights up and do domestic and do foreign territories differently. But these are things that you're not going to know if you don't understand where the business is going or where the business is at. And a lot of times I feel like this is a personal thing. Clients are relying on us to be able to tell them, like, here's the business decision. Our job is not to tell you what to do. At least my job is not to tell you what to do. My job is to be like, hey, this is the deal. This is the landscape. You now have to make an informed decision.
They
And
need to know what's going on so they can ask the right question.
you have to, and we'll sometimes lead you to the right questions. Like we have no problem doing that, especially when you're just now getting started. It's really, really difficult to navigate everything that's going on. I think the industry is moving at lightning speed these days. It's not the same model from day to day. The strikes changed a lot of things. Everything is changing from day to day. Economics are changing from day to day. But if you're not reading the trades, if you're not actually active on the business side of the business, do you really want to be in business? I guess is my question. You cannot just be a creative anymore. It doesn't, it doesn't work that way. If you actually want to make this a career, this is your business, especially when you're paying us. If you're paying somebody a percentage, we're on your team, but we work for you, but you are technically running a business. And I think a lot of the times it's hard for creatives to change their minds and be like, I am operating a business. I don't get to just be a creative and say, I want my movie made XYZ and not have a financial plan for how that's actually going to get made.
Sloan, what are your favorite websites for the trends?
The Ankler is a really good one. I'm not sponsored by any of these people. The Ankler is
We're
a really
open to
good
it.
one. Yeah. Oh my God, what is the
Deadline?
Deadline? There's one website that we get, my colleagues here. What's the one? Puck. Puck is a really, really good one. Puck is actually one of the ones that does like the four corners of the world. So they do like Washington, D.C., they do entertainment, they do Silicon Valley, and then there's one more. So it actually combines, huh? Hollywood Reporter and Variety. Like there's free ones, but I would say that if you're really serious about this, invest in some of the paid ones. Just like he said, go get an IMDb Pro. If you have an IMDb Pro, it'll show you a bunch of the articles and you can kind of like flag certain filmmakers and it'll pop up stuff. And so it's almost like a Reddit form, but invest in some of these ones that have paid subscriptions because they are talking to the people that you are going to be pitching your projects to every day. Like they are in these people's office, they understand where the money is going. And a lot of times people are like, well, how am I going to get the most money from my project? And it's like, are you making a project that people are paying the most money for? It's like that's kind of the question, and that changes from day to day, and you're not going to know that if you're not really engaged in a lot of these conversations.
I wanted to jump in. And one last thought of this is I know that the audience might be a bit diverse and from different countries. What Sloan was saying, as far as knowing the financial model and why it's important to have a business plan, at least in the United States, is we aren't heavy on the grants and the country specific grants that, for example, Europe is really heavy with. So I know there's like, also film festival grants or the Bertha Fund or all of these things that are very specific to Europe, France,
In Canada.
in Canada, perhaps.
Sorry, Canadian plug.
If you need your own visa for Canada, we got your person. But the United States is a different model. We're all about business here. We love art, but it's a business model, and so you're looking for a return on investment. You have investors. It's a little bit different in Europe.
I had one other question, but it's a very general question just in terms of what trends you guys are seeing in terms of, what are studios, production companies, streamers looking for? Are they looking for proof of concept or finished product? What trends are you guys?
Docu-sports.
What's that?
Docu-sports are so hot right now. If you're into sports, carry on.
Um, I haven't seen any of those. But what trends are you guys seeing on that side? And just to give a final thought on that.
That's hard.
Well, the studios that we've seen, I can
I
tell
was like,
you.
they want to hear from you, not from us.
The trends go and the deals that are coming in, it's a lot of sports and a lot of docu series and documentaries and the whole docu universe plus sports. Hot ticket.
But there's not a lot of big what we call middle tier movies being made anymore. They're either going big tent poles, you're Finding Nemo's, Transformers, Marvel, or they're going art house, right? A lot of studios are not putting out that 250 million mark anymore. Oh, should I say 100 million mark anymore? So if you have original idea, right, now's the time.
Be open to television. be as a filmmaker, you really need to be open to, television, limited series. If you're, if you're a writer, open to, other types of writing jobs, going the traditional model, maybe a writer's room. Um, I'm trying to think. There's in terms of trends on the talent side, we kind of are more responsive than seeing kind of what the studios want. But I will say, look at some a plug for these articles. Look at some articles that are talking about how studios are acquiring rights differently now than they were even 9 months ago. I think a really good one is maybe the Taylor Swift situation and how she handled that. Obviously, Taylor Swift is in a very different boat than everybody else. She can self fund for days and probably be just fine if nobody else wants to put it out there. But it is an interesting model that can even be done on a smaller scale of how she kind of ended up doing it, splitting up the rights, selling it to various places, and how, she was able to make a lot of money doing so, even selling it to AMC without having to go to anybody else. So I think studying how people are acquiring rights and maybe how you can even your creative may be affected by how the business is trending would be something really valuable for filmmakers to consider from the outset.
I have a tip on that is if you guys, based on all the websites we mentioned before and all the industry resources with Deadline, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, etc., look at the major festivals. TIFF is coming up. Look at what's going to be purchased this year and do it for the prior 4 or 5 years, and you'll be able to see the trend. Because you have reporters, entertainment reporters, who say they picked up X number of documentaries, the purchase price, somehow they get these numbers, is estimated to be, and then it's a number. And then you can really kind of make your own charts and graphs for drama, for documentaries, for, well, it's less series because at the film festivals, but you have TIFF coming up. You're going to have, I don't know, Berlinale and all these, and they have reports on it, and just make a chart and then go back a couple years and there's the trend.
Also, look at who's in these projects. If all of the projects that are being acquired have, A-list stars in them, understand what kind of budget your film has to have to be able to get an A-list star in your picture and then to get it purchased. It's like those are things that, I think a lot of people don't necessarily consider, but you can go down the line, like looking at who's in this film, who's the director of the film, like all of these little things. Not saying that your project is never going to be able to get made. Maybe then you consider, like, I want to make a short so that I can then find somebody who can finance my feature film, who can afford, so I can afford some of these A-list stars. But those are things that, sometimes people want to make their movie how they want to make their movie, but you have to understand what you're up against and what the playing field is right now.
Those were all my questions. Let's open it up to your questions.
Hello, all this has been so helpful, so thank you so much. I just have a question. If I made my film non-union and someone wants to option it, how does that like the residuals come into play there? This it wouldn't be a thing. Okay.
There's no unions involved at all?
No.
Then don't worry about it.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure that was all
It's
good.
not legal advice. You're not your
No one's
attorney.
gonna call you later.
Hi, thanks so much for all the info. I was wondering, in terms of the SAG agreements, when you said, oh, if the film is going to be in a theater at a festival, that would technically be theatrical. But let's say you did the festival run first, it was shown in theaters, and then if you wanted to put it on another platform, is that possible? Like a streaming platform after a theatrical film festival run for the same short film property.
You're saying that you entered into a festival and then
In
you got a
theory, like
deal.
let's say if I signed a media agreement, or if I just signed a theatrical agreement first, and then first the short film went into festivals, and had in the theater, like you said, so that would technically be theatrical. And then let's say you wanted to like then put it on a website or a streaming platform, maybe like YouTube as an example. This is all kind of you know, thinking out loud, hypothetical, but
Once you leave a film festival, what you don't want is saturate the market with your material because you want your material to still feel valuable. So if you leave a film festival, if you want to upload it to YouTube, I mean, I guess that's fine. But my my advice was more about entering into an agreement and then going to a festival and just making sure you have the right agreement going into that festival. So if you entered into a theatrical agreement and it aired at Sundance and the theater, then you're fine because you did what you told SAG you were going to do.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
So my question was, what kind of level does a filmmaker need to be at for one of your firms to actually be willing to take them on? And what is the percentage generally that you would have to pay? And then my other question is, if you're trying to do something with a public domain IP, is it worthwhile to get legal assistance to make sure that it really is public domain? And is that something your firms handle, that kind of research, or if that is that a different kind of firm?
I'll jump in real fast on all of this. So the law firm that I work at is on an hourly rate. We don't do percentages. I'll let my esteemed colleagues or panelists speak about their business model. It's quite pricey, frankly. It's I don't know, anywhere from 700 to 1,500 an hour. It's not so much what who the person is. There that really isn't a threshold of how we take clients. It'd be a conflicts check, and if it's something that's affordable for the individual. As far as your inquiry about the public domain work, that's sort of covered under more of how you would get E&O insurance. Let's say if it's a documentary, and you would need a fair use analysis, and there are boutique firms that specialize in that type of work. And it's basically them reviewing your movie twice. You give them a notes, annotating every scene, saying what's included, and they'll determine whether or not the risk is there or there isn't risk. So insurance can attach for you to proceed with distribution. I think that answers. Okay, not just fair use, sorry, public domain. I mean, if it's all cleared, then I guess there you go. You don't really need an analysis. If it's all pre, I forget what the year is, frankly.
It may be helpful to get somebody who
Sure.
that make sure that it is. Our firm is on a 5%. So we do 5% model, and that kind of 5% of every deal that we do. And that includes, and that does not include guild residuals, but it does include back end participations. For us, it really is like, where are you in your career and if we actually can add value. I don't think it's really about, the person or anything like that. I mean, where they are in their career. It's just, can we actually add value to the project? We're not really going to take on projects that aren't going to, have an upside for us at some point, because we are on a 5% model and you're not paying hourly. We can spend a lot of hours in the beginning having conversations with clients. And so we want to make sure that their career is on a trajectory where we see that we are going to be able to work together long term.
We're also a 5% firm, as most entertainment law firms in LA are, at least on the talent side. Uh, but we also do hourly as well, depending. So if you come to me with a deal in hand, what we call income producing deals, then it's 5%. If you come to me as a filmmaker and you say, I am putting together financiers and I'm making a movie, obviously there's no 5% because there's nothing to take 5% from. So in a situation like that, then I'll have to charge you hourly or a flat fee and what we call production legal. Um, so my firm does both. And as far as public domain, you really should consult with a clearance attorney. If you don't, there's a website that I always send people to called theclearancelab.com. On theclearancelab.com, they have different clearance packages that will give you both an analysis and a attorney opinion letter as well, and they have different packages to help you out if you're at the level where you don't want to pay for an attorney at a big firm, but you have a little bit of money. Clearancelab.com works.
That's great advice. We have time for one more question, so I'm going to hand the mic over here.
Thank you. So I know that you had mentioned earlier about middle market films not being as common, like being produced when they're that like middle budget range. Is that because there's something that about them that should be avoided, or that's something uh, that people should pursue?
I, I'm not. Hmm, not so much that they're being avoided. Is just that when you have a tent pole like a Marvel or Transformers or something like that, those movies. Here's what you guys should know about movies. 60% of movies don't go in the black. That's just a fact. So most studios would do tent poles because those tent poles will make up usually for those 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 movies that didn't make any money. And in art house films usually are made on scale, so you normally will make your money back. Those middle market films are a higher risk, right? And we're in a society right now where the industry's protracting, right? A lot of people are trying to cut costs and trying to save their money. And so those 85 million, 100 million, $125 million films now are just too risky. You're either going to make the film for 50 million and under, or you're going to go big and don't go at all. I'm not saying that those middle market films are not still being made. They're just not being made at such a clip anymore, unless it has Oscar intentions, right? And normally you'll know if it has Oscar intentions by who's attached and what the story's about.
Also, if it has like a co-pro like attached to it, like there's somebody else who's funding that picture out of their Prodco.
Okay, thank you.
Um, we're being asked to wrap up. So thank you very much for attending and for your time. And I guess we'll pass it on to the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Great. We have our next panel starting in here shortly. It'll be our last panel for the day before we move on to our evening reception. Thank you, everybody.